Okay, so now we need to create something, a custom attribute that will allow both of this main joint chain to follow the FK or the IK joint chain as the animator sees fit. So I'm going to go ahead and start reorganizing. Well, no, I'm going to leave it unorganized. I'll organize at the end of this tutorial. But typically, we want to keep everything in a single hierarchy. So we could do something like that if we wanted to. I'm going to hide these joints so I don't accidentally select them. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and rotate this back to 0, rotate this back to 0, and I need to create a controller. This is just going to be a fictitious controller, but we'll use it. So I'm going to create nerve primitive circle. There it is down there. I'm going to snap it up here to the wrist. Rotate it 90 degrees on Z. I'm going to parent it to the wrist, so it will follow the wrist wherever it goes, and then it will freeze transformations on this. Object. And I'll delete history on the control. Okay, so I got rid of the history. Then I need to rename it wrist underscore control. Okay, now I need a custom attribute on this particular control. So I'm going to click on edit in the channel box, add attribute. I'm going to call this FK-IK switch. So using camel case, FK-IK switch. And I like to use a float value for this so the animator can choose any point in between those two, the FK and the IK chain for the arm that they choose. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to say minimum is 0, maximum of 10, the default is 0. Then I'll click OK, and it's going to add that, and that attribute to the wrist control. We'll see that in the channel box. Okay, now we need to get that control to drive this chain, and so we need to do that by manipulating these constraint nodes. So if I select all 3 of those constraint nodes and then go to animate, set driven key, set, then it's going to load those constraints here in my driven portion of the set driven key window. And then I need to select my controller and click load driver, and there's my FK-IK switch attribute. So the only really fast way to do these is with scripting, but we could do it relatively quick. So I like to do this so that the listing that I make first, so FK is the first listing, and then IK. So FK is going to be represented by 0 in this attribute, and then the IK will be represented by a value of 10 in this FK-IK switch. So to get this to work, I need to make sure that this attribute, the FK-IK switch, is actually set to 0 first. Then I need to select this wrist joint orient constraint, and I need to select both of these attributes down here, the wrist FKW0 and the wrist IKW1. And I need to set the IK value in the channel box, I need to change it from 1 to 0. Okay? And then, with that set, both of these attributes selected in the driven portion, and then make sure I select the FK-IK switch in the driver portion and click key. Okay, we can see now in the hypergraph this has exterior control on it. It's animated. Okay, so now we need to do the same thing for the elbow joint and the shoulder joint. So select them both, and both these attributes in the elbow. Make sure our FK-IK switch attribute is still selected, and key. Okay, same thing for the shoulder. It simplifies things a lot if you make sure you select your driving objects when we were creating these constraints in the same order. If you don't do it in the same order, then these attributes that it creates over here, this, like for instance, the shoulder FKW0 and the shoulder IKW1, are, if you select them in order, the FK will always show up first. If you change your order, then these attributes are created in order that you selected the driving object for the constraint. Okay. Right. Then we'll key that. So now they're all keyed. So now I need to select my FK-IK switch, and I'm going to change its value to 10. And then I need to go back and do the same thing. I'll do it reverse order. I'm going to start with the shoulder. So this time I got to set the FK version to 0 and the IK version to 1. And then I key. Then I go to the elbow and do the same thing. 0, 1. Make sure I have the right attribute selected. Key. And then do it again for the wrist. So it looks like it did it. Okay, maybe I'm talking backwards. So I need to go back and check, see what I've done. Because the wrist says it's already been done. So we'll key it here just to, and if nothing's changed, then it won't change anything. And we have to do a little research. So when you look at the shoulder, so it's the shoulder that I haven't done. So I need to go here, enter 0 for the FK version, 1 for the IK version, and then key. Okay, so now with this FK-IK switch set to the IK version, which is 10, then I should be able to rotate this IK handle. I'm going to grab 2 of them, and this follows just like it should. Okay, but if I want to switch it to the FK joint, to follow the FK joint chain, then I just grab my attribute and I change that value down, and it will rotate back to the FK chain. And so I can switch which joint chain the animation follows. So now the animator has an option to animate either IK or FK, assuming we had set up the IK controls on the IK chain. Anyway, that ought to get it working. So I can rotate this FK chain. And I can make this blend between the two real easy. Okay, now I told you I'd do a little scene organization. What I like to do is I like to parent both of these. If I duplicate a joint chain, I like to parent them all to the same node. So I'm going to parent both of these to the clavicle because that's what they belong to. That way if I move the clavicle, all 3 of them are going to move. Now, I want to keep this one separate, the bind separate from this entirely. But I do want them in the same hierarchy. And when I mean separate, I mean I don't want them to be